LiberalViewer presents.
So, welcome to LiberalViewer Sunday Live Clip Roundup. Thanks for joining me. I've picked out over 40 of the weekend's best clips for what should be a really good show for tonight. As usual, my clips come mostly from the Sunday morning news analysis shows on the big five corporate outlets of ABC, NBC, CBS, CNN, and Fox News, the so-called corporate media here in the United States. And I'll also have several political comedy clips from HBO's Real Time with Bill Maher last Friday, as well as a clip from Weekend Update on last night's Saturday Night Live. You can see the topics I'm covering listed down in the video description. I'm not going to go through all of them, but if you're watching this as a recorded show, you can also see time indexes down there to skip to the topics that most interest you. Among the topics I'll be covering tonight are the Germanwings flight that went down in the Alps between Germany and Spain, the talks with Iran and the civil war in Yemen, and this controversy about a Religious Freedom Restoration Act in Indiana that the governor just signed that would allow businesses to discriminate against gays possibly. And I have several other topics I have listed, but before I get to any of those, just as my privilege of as the host of the show, I'm going to do sort of a nerd, geek, Star Trek type thing. You know, I'm actually wearing again my What Does the Spock Say t-shirt here in honor of Leonard Nimoy, and I still have the Leonard Nimoy coffee cup behind my left shoulder there. And today I have clips from Zachary Quinto, who played Mr. Spock in the reincarnation, or the reboot, I guess they call, of Star Trek. Although there was something technically not correct about the way Bill Maher introduced him on HBO's Real Time last Friday, which I will discuss in a very nerdy way after you see that clip here.
He stars in NBC's The Slap and The Girls. He's Ace. Love Ace. He stars in that, and also you know him as Mr. Spock. Zachary Quinto is with us. And now the only surviving Mr. Spock. Oof, it's true. Didn't mean to bum the crowd out before your introduction.
So both Bill Maher there and then Zachary Quinto agreed with the idea that Zachary Quinto is now the only surviving Mr. Spock, but actually if you're a real Star Trek nerd you would know that there are other actors who have played Mr. Spock. In Star Trek 3 Search for Spock there were younger versions of Mr. Spock who younger actors played, and then even in the first movie that Zachary Quinto was in, the first reboot, I believe there was a scene where he was like a younger Mr. Spock who was like fighting with some of the other Vulcan kids, and that was also played by a younger actor who I guess technically is a surviving actor who has played Mr. Spock. So I just wanted to be nitpicky, a nitpicky Trekker, whatever you want to call it, for that clip. Before I get to what is more of a real issue, which is this law in Indiana, this anti-gay discriminate, or this law, it's called a Religious Freedom Restoration Act, that gives an exemption to other laws that stop discrimination and allows religious people to say, well, based on my faith, I want to discriminate, or that's sort of a simplistic version of it. I'll get to a more complex version. But in terms of the simplistic way of looking at it, I want to show the one joke I'm going to use from Weekend Update on Saturday Night Live last night, and that's talking about this Religious Freedom Restoration Act that Governor of Indiana Mike Pence signed this week. Colin Jost on Weekend Update describing it here.
The governor of Indiana has signed a new law allowing businesses to turn away gay and lesbian customers, saying it's part of their religious freedom. You'll be able to tell which stores are supporting the new law because they'll have these helpful little signs.
Now, I wish it were that simple and that you could necessarily trust the marketplace and you didn't need regulation where businesses that didn't serve gays would go out of business. But, Hobby Lobby's in business, and it is discriminating against its employees based on its religious beliefs. And for a long time, there were restaurants and motels and gas stations throughout the South that thrived with, whites only, or with apartheid facilities. So American history itself proves you can't really rely on the market. And that's just one counter argument I want to make to some of the conservative arguments for this, I guess, that you might hear. But before I get to that and to the exclusive interview with the governor of Indiana, Mike Pence, the Republican who signed this law, not answering any questions about it really. First, I want to show a background report from the ABC reporter's name is Rebecca Jarvis, talking about what happened in Indiana this last week here.
With thousands taking on Indiana's governor and legislature over the state's new Religious Freedom Act, Governor Mike Pence announced overnight he's willing to clarify the intent of the legislation. Critics say the law, signed Thursday, gives businesses a license to discriminate, allowing them to refuse services to gay couples for religious reasons. And now there are new questions about its impact on next week's NCAA Final Four in Indianapolis. NCAA President Mark Emmert saying the association is deeply committed to providing an inclusive environment for all our events. We are especially concerned about how this legislation could affect our student athletes and employees. And the NBA and Indiana Pacers saying all fans, players, and employees should feel welcome at all events. But supporters note 19 other states have similar legislation designed to keep government from forcing organizations to provide services against their religious beliefs.
And if I thought it was about discrimination, I would have vetoed it. In fact, it doesn't even apply to disputes between private individuals unless government action is involved.
But this morning, backlash brewing from Apple chief Tim Cook saying we are deeply disappointed, to Jason Collins, the NBA's first openly gay player, asking, is it going to be legal for someone to discriminate against me? And now a new Twitter hashtag, Boycott Indiana, growing online. All of it worrying those promoting business in Indiana.
It doesn't necessarily align with the brand position that is Hoosier hospitality.
For this week, Rebecca Jarvis,
So you can see from that pretty good report from ABC's Rebecca Jarvis that there's a lot of pushback, especially from businesses, against this law in Indiana, which would make you think that there's going to be some changes. But I'm going to show a few clips now from the governor of Indiana, Mike Pence, and his strategy seemed to be to deny and dodge the whole issue. First, you can see when George Stephanopoulos asked him if signing the law was a mistake, he denied that it was about religious liberty, not about discrimination, and it's all like a media conspiracy, as you can see in this clip.
Governor, thank you for joining us. Was it a mistake
George.
to sign
Thanks for the opportunity.
So was it a mistake to sign this law?
Absolutely not. The Religious Freedom Restoration Act was signed into federal law by President Bill Clinton more than 20 years ago, and it lays out a framework for ensuring that a very high level of scrutiny is given anytime government action impinges on the religious liberty of any American. After that, some 19 states followed that, adopted that statute, and after last year's Hobby Lobby case, Indiana properly brought the same version that then State Senator Barack Obama voted for in Illinois before our legislature, and I was proud to sign it into law last week. But look, I think I understand that there's been a tremendous amount of misinformation and misunderstanding around this bill, and I'm just determined, and I appreciate the time on your program, I'm just determined to clarify this. Well, this is about protecting the religious liberty of people of faith and families of faith across this country. That's what it's been for more than 20 years, and that's what it is now as the law in Indiana, George.
But I think
now, he says it's about protecting religious liberty, and he wants to clarify the issue. He said that very clearly. He wants to clarify the issue, but he would not answer simple questions like, does this bill allow a baker or a florist or whatever to discriminate against serving gay couples who want them for their same-sex marriage? Or And I can't even show how many times he dodged that question. I think I'm going to show about a 3-minute clip here where he dodged it at least 3 times, and then I think I show like the 4th question, and I just can't show how many times he dodged it, but many times, starting in this clip.
That is that in Indiana, your civil rights laws don't include sexual orientation as a protected class, and even some of the supporters of the bill who appeared with you when you signed the bill, Eric Miller of Advance America, wrote that it will protect those who oppose gay marriage. He put up this example. He said, Christian bakers, florists, and photographers should not be punished for refusing to participate in a homosexual marriage. So this is a yes or no question. Is Advance America right when they say a florist in Indiana can now refuse to serve a gay couple without fear of punishment?
Well, let me explain to you. The purpose of this bill is to empower, and has been for more than 20 years, George. This is not speculative. The purpose of this legislation, which is the law in all 50 states in our federal courts, and it's the law by either statute or court decisions in some 30 other states, is very simply to empower individuals when they believe that actions of government impinge on their constitutional First Amendment freedom of religion. And frankly, George, there's a lot of people across this country who, you're looking at Obamacare and the Hobby Lobby decision, looking at other cases, who feel that their religious liberty is being infringed upon, and the Religious Freedom Restoration Act at the federal level, and all the states now, including Indiana, who have it, are simply about addressing that. This is not about discrimination. This is about empowering people to confront government overreach, George.
Though, on it, because your supporters say it would. And so yes or no, if a florist in Indiana refuses to serve a gay couple at their wedding, is that legal now in Indiana?
George, this is where this debate has gone with misinformation and frankly,
it's just a question, sir. Yes or no?
Well, there's been shameless rhetoric about my state and about this law and about its intention all over the internet. People are trying to make it about one particular issue, and now you're doing that as well. The issue here, the Religious Freedom Restoration Act has been on the books for more than 20 years. It does not apply, George, to disputes between individuals unless government action is involved. And in point of fact, in more than 2 decades, the Religious Freedom Restoration Act has never been used to undermine anti-discrimination laws in this country.
Sir, I'm just bringing up a message from one of your supporters. That was one of your supporters who was talking about the bill right there. It said it would protect a Christian florist who against any kind of punishment. Is that true or not?
George, look, the issue here is, is tolerance a two-way street or not? I mean, there's a lot of talk about tolerance in this country today having to do with people on the left. But here Indiana steps forward to protect the constitutional rights and privileges of freedom of religion for people of faith and families of faith in our state. And this avalanche of intolerance that's been poured on our state is just outrageous. You've been to Indiana a bunch of times. You know it. There are no kinder, more generous, more welcoming, more hospitable people in America than in the 92 counties of Indiana. And yet, because we simply stepped forward for the purpose of recognizing the religious liberty rights of all the people of Indiana, of every faith, we suffered under this avalanche for the last several days of condemnation, and it's completely baseless. It's not based on any fact whatsoever.
I completely agree with you about the good people.
And I think people are getting tired of it, George. I really do. Tolerance is a two-way street.
So when you say tolerance is a two-way street, does that mean that Christians who want to refuse service, or people of any other faith who want to refuse service to gays and lesbians, that it's now legal in the state of Indiana?
So, as you might expect, he didn't answer it when George Stephanopoulos asked the question that way, and you can see the entire interview by clicking on the link to This Week with George Stephanopoulos down in the video description. I'm not going to show how many times he dodged it. I think I showed at least 3 there. And then he asked him a couple questions about whether he would be open to changing the law, and he wasn't really open to changing, but possibly clarifying, though he wasn't that specific. And then at the end, George Stephanopoulos came back to sort of a different version of that same question, which he again wouldn't answer, while at the same time claiming he was there to try to clear up the meaning of the law without wanting to answer any questions about, a yes or no question about whether it allows discrimination against gays, as you can see in this final clip from governor of Indiana, Mike Pence, Republican, of course, over here.
Every Hoosier of every faith.
Final question, final yes or no question, Governor. Do you think it should be legal in the state of Indiana to discriminate against gays or lesbians?
George,
it's a yes or no question.
Come on. Hoosiers don't believe in discrimination. I mean, the way I was raised in a small town in southern Indiana is you're kind and caring and respectful to everyone. Anybody that's been in Indiana for 5 minutes knows that Hoosier hospitality is not a slogan, it's a reality. People tell me when I travel around the country, gosh, I went to your state and people are so nice. I mean, this is not about discrimination. This is about protecting the religious liberty of every Hoosier, of every faith, and we're going to continue to work our hearts out to clarify that to the people of Indiana and the people of this great country.
Yes or no, should it be legal to discriminate against gays and lesbians?
George, you're following the mantra of the last week online, and you're trying to make this issue about something else. What I am for is protecting, at the highest standards in our courts, the religious liberty of Hoosiers. I signed the bill. We're going to continue to explain it to people that don't understand it, and if possible, we will find a way to amplify what this bill really is in the legislative process. But I stand by this law. It was an important step forward when Bill Clinton signed it in 1993. It's an important step forward to keeping the promises of our Bill of Rights and the First Amendment and our Indiana Constitution.
Now, a couple things about that. First, he dodged the question, of course, while saying he wanted to amplify the meaning of the law, but he won't answer simple questions about the law. He referred to Bill Clinton, like he did in one of those previous answers, signing a Religious Freedom Restoration Act that applied to the federal government, although that's a little different than applying it to state governments, because there's some question as to whether state religious freedom restoration acts are even constitutional, despite the constitutionality of the federal one. And also, when Clinton signed that, that was also when he was signing the Defense of Marriage Act, that was saying that the federal government would never recognize same-sex marriage and marriage equality, and that's totally turned around. The law is totally turned around, which is why the history with these Religious Freedom Restoration Acts isn't really that dispositive on what's going to happen next, because we're sort of in a new era of law with now so many states, over 30 states, allowing same-sex couples their right to marriage equality. So I thought that was kind of a ridiculous analysis and ridiculous dodging from the Republican governor of Indiana, Mike Pence. And the last thing that was kind of ridiculous about it is the way he referred to Hoosiers over and over again. I find that really amusing, because when I lived in St. Louis, Missouri, for some reason in Missouri, or at least in St. Louis, the word Hoosier is used as a pejorative, an insult, meaning like a hick, a redneck, a hillbilly. But I guess in Indiana they use it with pride. I don't know why people in Missouri hate people in Indiana, but I guess it's one of those cross-state rivalries. But to hear him say Hoosier over and over again, when I lived in St. Louis for like 5 years and heard that used as an insult all the time, that's kind of funny too. But I want to move on to the next topic, which is kind of the breaking news story of the week, or I guess one of the breaking news stories of the week, this crash of the Germanwings flight between Germany and Spain, and the developing news about how the copilot was actually responsible for the crash. And you wouldn't think that would be much of a subject for humor, but over on HBO's Real Time with Bill Maher, Bill Maher found a way to try to make some jokes about it. And this is jokes at the expense of Germans, and I know I have a significant number of German viewers, and so I wanted to show you how Bill Maher made fun of your Germanness in the first clip on the actual tragic crash of this Germanwings flight that killed 150 people that Bill Maher made fun of last Friday over in this clip.
The sad story of the week you saw this, the mystery of the Lufthansa Germanwings plane that crashed in the Alps is not a mystery anymore. One of the pilots was just depressed. This is scary stuff. Andreas Lubitz, he was 28. His friend said he was bright, but also somewhat somber, possibly sinister, a little offbeat. What doctors call German. I tell you, I used to worry about the pilot being drunk. Now I'm like, well, at least he's in a good mood. Okay, that's... I'll drink with you, Captain. Let me top that off for you, sir.
So I guess Bill Maher found a way to make fun of drunk pilots and Germans to make fun of this tragic plane crash. But actually, if you want to hear one of the most harrowing clips, one of the most nasty descriptions of what happened on this Lufthansa, or I'm sorry, Germanwings is a subsidiary of Lufthansa, on the Germanwings flight. This is a report on CNN State of the Union that was hosted by Dana Bash this weekend, and I think she redid the broadcast live, so maybe she's going to be the new permanent host, because none of the other temporary hosts have ever done the 9 a.m. version live after doing the 6 a.m. version. But here she is talking to their reporter, talking from Cologne, Germany. His name is, let me make sure, Frederick Pleitgen. And he talks about this transcript that appeared in Germany's biggest tabloid. And some of the details make you kind of scared if you think about being in the position of those passengers and what was going on that flight, as you can hear over in this clip.
Well, Dana, the transcript describes the flight as one that begins in the early stages as almost normal. It takes off about 20 minutes late, but apparently there are already telltale signs that perhaps the co-pilot, Andreas Lubitz, was trying to set his captain up to leave the cockpit at some point. Now, before takeoff, the captain tells his co-pilot that he forgot to go to the bathroom before leaving Barcelona, and immediately Lubitz says, well, you can go anytime, don't worry about it. Then what happens is the plane takes off again, it got 20 minutes late, and it reaches cruising altitude a short time later, and immediately again Lubitz says, if you want to go to the bathroom now, you can go. And shortly afterwards, you do hear, this is according to this newspaper here in Germany, you do hear the pilot seat go backwards, the captain tell the co-pilot that he is now in control of the aircraft, and him then leave the cockpit. Again, this is according to the Bild newspaper here in Germany, which is the largest newspaper of this country, also known as somewhat of a tabloid. They say that this is directly from the transcript of the voice recorder, Dana.
And that transcript, as it's reported, is incredibly scary, as you can imagine, when you get to those last few minutes of the flight. What does it say?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's absolutely chilling what this transcript seems to offer. It begins at 10:29 local time as they're flying over Central Europe, flying over Southern Europe there near France. Their air traffic control, and remember, at this point in time, the captain has already left the cockpit. Air traffic radar detects that the plane is beginning to descend. Shortly afterwards, air traffic control tries to get in touch with this aircraft, but there's no response. Shortly after that, there's a warning from the cockpit saying sink rate, which means that the plane is going down awfully fast. And shortly after that, the pilot can be heard screaming, for God's sake, open the door. And this is also the first time that apparently passengers can be heard screaming as well. Then at 10:35, there's a loud metallic bang, as though someone's trying to bang on the door from the outside. And at this point, the plane is at 7,000 meters altitude. 90 seconds after that, there's another alarm that goes off in the cockpit saying terrain, pull up, meaning the plane is getting closer to some sort of terrain on the ground. Keep in mind, we are in a mountainous area. At this point, the plane is at 5,000 meters, and there's the pilot again screaming, open the door. The plane continues to descend towards the French Alps, and the co-pilot can be heard breathing normally. Then at 10:40, apparently the plane's right wing can be heard scraping the top of a mountain. After that, the passengers are heard screaming one more time, and that is the end of the reporting of the recording. So therefore, a very, very chilling read through this alleged transcript. This is, again, from the Bild newspaper here in Germany, which is known as a large newspaper, as a tabloid. The French authority that's investigating the downing of the plane, called the BEA, has already said that it's dismayed by the fact that this transcript has been made public. However, it did not deny that what is in this transcript is in fact authentic. We, of course, have no way of verifying its authenticity.
So, assuming that transcript is authentic, that is a pretty harrowing account of what happened on that plane and to those passengers. And, you know, they mentioned there that it was a metallic object striking the door in a clip. I'm not sure where I saw when I was watching various news shows this morning, and this is not a clip I'm going to show you. I saw one person claim that it was an axe, that they tried to break open the door with an axe, that apparently on these flights there's an axe hidden somewhere in the passenger compartment that only the crew knows about. And you heard in that report from CNN that there was a metallic object striking the door. Actually, in the next clip I'm going to show, Fox News Sunday, this is their reporter Amy Kellogg. She first talks about what people who knew this co-pilot, Andreas Lubitz, what they're saying about him, but she also mentions in her report that it's a blunt object, not a metallic object, so it's sort of different from this axe story. I don't know how that's going to turn out, but I'll talk about that a little more after you see the Fox News Sunday clip on this over here.
Chris, the most dramatic quotes from people who knew co-pilot Andreas Lubitz come from a woman who is a former flight attendant, and claims that she was a former lover. She told the German newspaper Bild that Lubitz had once told her, Chris, that one day he would do something heinous that the whole world would remember him for. And he also used to wake in the night screaming, we're going down, we're going down. Now, Bild on Sunday has also published some snippets from the cockpit voice recorder in which the captain thumps the cockpit door with some apparently blunt instrument while shouting, for God's sake, open the door. The Daily Mail reports today some details about Lubitz's last girlfriend, the teacher he was supposedly hoping to marry. The Mail says she recently broke it off due to his increasingly controlling and Jekyll and Hyde-like behavior. In another twist, Bild reports that she is pregnant. Now, Die Welt quotes a senior Dusseldorf investigator as saying they found lots of psychiatric medication in Lubitz's apartment and personal notes indicating that he was profoundly depressed. Also, there are numerous reports that he had a serious vision problem. All of this taken together might support something that flight attendant reportedly said about him, that he may have crashed the plane because he feared he would never be able to obtain his dream of becoming a long-haul flight captain with Lufthansa. He may also have feared losing his pilot license. Finally, Chris, a senior French investigator said yesterday that while no one is disputing the version of events out there, and while Lubitz's personality is very relevant here, it is important that other scenarios remain open, including the possibility that there may also have been some sort of mechanical issue. Chris.
So that's the Fox News reporter Amy Kellogg. You heard her reporting on what they're saying in this town in Germany about the co-pilot who's apparently responsible for this crash, and she said that there was sounds of a blunt instrument being used on the cockpit door, which is different from what you saw in the CNN report about a sharp metal banging sound, and that is significant, like I said, because of this whole axe issue. And it also plays into something that you're going to see in this ABC report. This is ABC reporter David Curley reporting on the same facts, and you'll see he also talks about some of those same events that occurred during the flight. And then at the end of his report, he emphasizes this rule that they're changing in Europe that has been a rule in the United States about having more than one person in the cockpit, which I don't think actually cures everything. If someone's really intent on doing this, they can overpower a flight attendant who's not expecting it, especially if there's an axe available, which is why I think that's a significant fact. If you have an axe, then maybe the person would go and get the axe. I don't know. But anyway, here's the final clip I want to show on the Germanwings crash that killed 150 people. This is ABC reporter David Curley talking about it over here.
As investigators this morning continue to comb through the life of 27-year-old Andreas Lubitz, impacts of his deadly decision already affecting aviation. Listen to another Germanwings co-pilot address his passengers.
My crew today and me, we are all here to fly with you.
An attempted reassurance as airlines and passengers are asking questions. First, should pilots be more rigorously screened psychologically? In Lubitz's apartment, investigators found prescriptions and a doctor's note crumpled and discarded, saying he was unfit to work. Prosecutors saying he kept an illness from his employer. Still, Lubitz passed screenings from Lufthansa and was issued a medical certificate from the FAA after his training here in the U.S. But that initial clearance usually requires little, if any, time with a psychologist.
Pilots are required to self-disclose if there are any psychological issues or treatments. Obviously, in a volunteer system like that, it has limitations.
Second, how to look for warning signs. There are new reports now that depression may have led Lubitz to take extended time off during his flight training in Arizona. Should that have raised red flags?
Absolutely. People fall through the cracks. The reason, I think, is that there's no set standard for how we're supposed to evaluate these people.
And then there's the question that already has some airlines acting. Should pilots be allowed in the cockpit alone? On the Germanwings flight, the pilot can be heard desperately banging on the door, trying to get back in.
But really, this is kind of a simple fix. Put the flight attendant in the cockpit when the pilot steps out.
Lufthansa now saying it will do what U.S. airlines do, mandate that two people must be inside the cockpit at all times. For This Week, David Curley, ABC News.
So that's a pretty good report from ABC reporter David Curley, but emphasizing having multiple people in the cockpit at all times as a solution, I think, doesn't really address the problem of someone who is really intent on causing harm and can overpower the second person in the cockpit as their first move. But I don't know, I guess this guy did sort of wait till the pilot was out of the cockpit and even suggested that he leave, so maybe that was important. But I don't know. Could he have overpowered a flight attendant? Probably he could have. I don't know. It depends. I guess it depends on whether you assume that flight attendants are stereotypically easy to overpower, and I guess you shouldn't have a stereotype about flight attendants. But speaking of stereotypes, I want to talk about the Republican Party, which is full of a lot of people who hold a lot of stereotypes, and I guess one of those is the senator from Texas who was the first to announce for running for president in the Republican primary to be the candidate in 2016, Senator Ted Cruz from Texas. I think I just said Texas twice, but I talked about him being the first one to announce on my broadcast last Sunday because he announced last Monday, and that became a topic on various shows this week because now he has actually announced. First, I want to show how Bill Maher on HBO's Real Time last Friday dealt with one of the things Ted Cruz said that is particularly controversial or ridiculous, or I don't know, however you want to say it. I thought was kind of ridiculous. That after 9/11, he decided to change from liking rock music to country music because of their reaction to 9/11, and I thought Bill Maher, for all of his faults and flaws, and I see some of you dissing Bill Maher down in the comment section as I'm watching this as a live show. For all of his faults and flaws, I think he did a good job of showing a refutation of what Ted Cruz was claiming that doesn't even make any sense and nobody really believes. Over in this first clip about the Republican Party and the split in the Republican Party as the 2016 presidential nomination process continues, that you can see over here.
This guy, he said, I grew up listening to classic rock. My music changed. My music taste changed on 9/11. Who thinks that's true? He said, I didn't like how rock music responded. And country music, the way they responded resonated with me. I had an emotional reaction that said, these are my people. Right. I love the rodeo and Paula Deen and books about dead kids who go to heaven and come back. That's who I am. So I looked up how rock responded with 3 giant fundraisers.
Huge concerts.
September 21st, all 4 networks showed America, a tribute to heroes. Billy Joel, Bruce Springsteen, U2, Tom Petty, Neil Young, Bon Jovi, Pearl Jam, a virtual roster of classic rock.
I think it speaks to, in a way...
October 20th, Paul McCartney's concert for New York. The Who, the Rolling Stones, Paul McCartney, David Bowie, Elton John, Eric Clapton. The next day, Michael Jackson had the few rock classic people who were left. Aerosmith, Rod Stewart, Carole King. Paul McCartney wrote a song called Freedom. Springsteen, the Rising.
Yeah,
Bon Jovi, Undivided. Neil Young, Let's Roll. How much more could
Bill, but let's quote Governor Huckabee. Were they praying? I mean, did they really mean it? That's the problem.
Yeah, and did they mention lift kits, trailer hitches, beers, and getting drunk on a plane? I don't think so. Case
it shows a willingness on the part of Ted Cruz, I think, to say whatever it is that people want to hear. It's a real problem, his ability to deny certain aspects of things that are scientifically proven through the course of certainly climate change and global warming and many other topics. It's just somebody that is willing to pander to the people that he knows he has to get because they're really his only hope.
His only hope. Wait, isn't that a quote from Star Wars, from a guy who's in Star Trek? Help me, Obi-Wan, you're my only hope? Or wait, no. I think I'm showing my nerdiness again there, but what he's saying about Ted Cruz appealing to people who don't know what's going on, I think there is some, or who have some sort of alternate reality. I think there's something to that, and I'm going to show an extended clip of an actual interview with Senator Ted Cruz, and this is the only clip of Ted Cruz I'm actually going to show. I'll spare you more of that, but it's a fairly long clip. He was over on CNN State of the Union with Dana Bash, and she asked him about his likability problem. And along the way, he did say that he doesn't attack people personally, and I thought about that, and I'm not sure if that's true. You can let me know down in the comment section if you can think of personal attacks that he's made on people. But he did sort of do the alternate reality argument about how the Democrats forced the shutdown of the government. He was all for keeping the government open, as you can see during this extended answer to his to a question from Dana Bash about his likability problem over in, let's see, let me make sure I click on the right clip here. Oh, here it is.
I want to ask you also about something that you and I have talked about several times over the years, which is likability. With respect, you're not the most popular man in the Republican conference. I think you know that by now. You wear it as a badge of honor because you say it's because you stand up for principle. But again, when you're president of the United States, you have to have at least some measure or level of likability in order to reach out and get things done. How will you overcome that?
Well, you know, I'll point out that there's an almost inverse relationship between being liked and appreciated in Washington, D.C. and reviled back home, and being reviled in Washington and appreciated back home. I mean, you remember, because you came to Texas after we had the historic fight to stop Obamacare, to defund Obamacare. Where a lot of people in Washington, now I didn't support the shutdown, but I did support defunding Obamacare. I think it was a mistake when Harry Reid and the Democrats forced a shutdown. But my point was, you were in Texas when I came home to the state convention of the Texas Federation of Republican Women, and you saw the reaction of, in that case, the women back home who enthusiastically appreciated someone who was standing and fighting.
I absolutely did, but the White House isn't in Texas. It's in Washington.
That's part of the problem.
Well, but you have to work with, if you want to be president of the United States, you're going to live in the White House and work within the confines of the government. You know, you're asking people to text about the Constitution. Yeah. So you obviously, you know, you don't want to change the system that much. So within those confines, as president, how do you change that? How do you get to a place where you would be likable enough and have relationships enough to actually get things done?
Well, let me draw a distinction on the likability question that you're raising. There's a distinction between how you treat people and what it is you say and do. In my time in the Senate, there had been more than a few rocks tossed my directions from Democrats and Republicans. And yet in my entire time there, I haven't reciprocated. You have never heard me speak ill of any senator, Republican or Democrat, and I don't intend to start. And in fact, in the presidential race in 2016, there may be other candidates who choose to throw rocks my direction. I'm not going to engage in the personal mudslinging, in the negative attacks on people's character. And I think that's a big part of treating people with civility and respect that I've endeavored to do every day I've been in Washington.
No, I'm not sure if that's true. I'm not familiar enough with everything Senator Ted Cruz has said to know whether he's avoided personal attacks on other members of the Senate, Democrat and Republican, although sometimes calling them Democrat senators instead of Democratic, some people consider that an insult. I think he's been kind of harsh on President Obama, though I don't have exact quotes available. But I also want to show, for those who think that there's no chance that Senator Ted Cruz could win the nomination, which is kind of been my position, that he's in it for the fundraising and for raising his own profile, but not actually to win the nomination, because he has kind of a ceiling beyond which he can't be successful. But I want to show an analysis from Chuck Todd over on NBC's Meet the Press, where he talks about the way the primaries are set up, and especially with the percentage of evangelical voters who are available in these important primaries that have been front-loaded into the Republican process, that Ted Cruz could actually get a shot at the nomination. And it has to do, like I said, with the evangelical content, because as I mentioned on my show last week, he gave his announcement speech about running for president at Liberty University, the university founded by Jerry Falwell, and reached out to evangelicals, I guess for this very purpose that Chuck Todd explains over in this clip.
Ted Cruz. As always, Iowa's first. And looking back at 2012 exit polls, evangelicals made up over a majority of Republican voters, 57%. Well, 2 states later, you get to South Carolina, third up overall. In 2012, evangelicals made up 65% of the GOP primary vote. And this year, success in Iowa and South Carolina could mean a lot more momentum and more money heading into this election cycle's game changer, what we're calling the SEC primary. Here's what's happening. For you non-college football fans out there, SEC stands for the Southeastern Conference, and multiple southern states are in talks to set their primary on the same day, resulting in a super evangelical Tuesday. Georgia, Alabama, Tennessee, Mississippi, Arkansas, and Texas. The thing those states all have in common, evangelicals make up the largest religious segment in the state. They're 24% of the population in Texas, 39% in Mississippi, and 41% of the population in Alabama. So the proposed SEC primary could give a candidate like Ted Cruz, if he is the sole evangelical candidate, momentum that Huckabee and Santorum never were able to count on. And they could propel Cruz to not just relevancy, but to an actual shot at the nomination. Imagine that. It's 6 of the first 8 primaries. That'd be a big deal. More on
That would be a big deal. Imagine that. That is a little bit scary, but one possible candidate that could stop that from happening is Governor Mike Huckabee himself, who Chuck Todd was claiming that Ted Cruz would be a successor to, but by taking those evangelical voters. And that would be true, I guess, if Mike Huckabee weren't going to get into the race, and it sounds like he may well get into the race, although there's still a significant possibility he's just trying to sell his new book. And he was actually over on HBO's Real Time with Bill Maher, as well as on CBS's Face the Nation. I'm going to show 2 clips from him. First, on Real Time with Bill Maher last Friday, Bill specifically asked him if Ted Cruz was eating his lunch, stealing his voters, and Mike Huckabee's response is, I guess, to kind of assume he has those Christian evangelical voters and not even try to reach out to them, but to reach out to this different constituency that I will talk about after you see that clip right over here.
Well, I'm going to ask the panel about this in a minute, about this strategy, because Ted Cruz, who declared this week, is trying to steal your lunch. I mean, you're the real pastor. You're a real pastor, right?
I was 25 years ago.
Okay.
I don't know what you were doing 25 years ago.
I know, but you are a a Jesus enthusiast.
I do love Jesus. I don't even deny that.
Right, in a way that he really can't compete with, and yet he declared, he could have picked his alma mater, Harvard, to declare, but that would send an awful message that he believes in reason and logic. He declared at Liberty he's going after your vote, and now I assume you're running for president. You're here.
I will make a decision final sometime.
You're running for president. Okay, so, I mean, winning 8 states the last time you ran, that's a lot of states. I mean, a lot of people run and don't win any states.
Yeah.
So you have a place a springboard to go from. What do you think about Ted Cruz getting in? Is he a threat to you?
Well, everybody's a threat to me. I think they should all drop out and let me have it to myself. But, you know, everybody assumes that the only people who supported me 8 years ago were the people who were religious. And the fact is, if they'd all really supported me, I'd have been the nominee.
Right.
The fact is, a lot of the people who supported me were working class people, the kind of people I grew up with, because that's where I came from. I am not blue blood. I'm blue collar.
Right.
I'm the first male in my entire family lineage that ever graduated high school.
You're from the same town as Bill Clinton.
I am. You know, Bill Clinton and I are both from Hope, Arkansas.
You could have flipped a coin and wound up in different parties.
Could have. But he moved away when he was like 5 years old, and I stayed. Because my family didn't have enough money to go, so there we were.
He moved away from a lot of things.
The working class people, that's where my support really came from. It was from truck drivers and baggage handlers and taxi drivers, and there's a loss of connection between the political class and the people who are working.
I wish we had more time to talk about why I don't think people like that should vote Republican. But you make that case, and we'll see if they do.
I think I can.
Thank you, Governor. I appreciate you.
So, watching that clip, I definitely got the feeling that former governor and former Fox News commentator Mike Huckabee is going to run for president, because he's got that working class rhetoric down, the working class blue collar voters that are really going to be important that the Republicans have some, especially the white ones, I guess, have a lot of success with if they have any chance in 2016. And I think it's kind of smart for him to forget about the Christian evangelicals that he pretty much already has a lot of just by his background and, you know, a lot of stuff he's done in the past and said in the past, and to try to reach out to those additional blue-collar working-class voters. And he basically had the exact same answer on Face the Nation with Bob Schieffer that I just showed when he talked to Bill Maher on HBO's Real Time last Friday. And then when Bob Schieffer asked him an additional question about, you know, what do you have, what do you bring that other candidates don't have, or I'm not sure that's exactly what he said, but you can see Governor Mike Huckabee really tried to expand on this whole working class issues campaign rhetoric that I think shows he may well be running for president, as you can see over here.
What do you see as the main challenge for the next person who becomes president?
I think it's got to restore hope in America again, bring this country back where we believe we're going to be able to be at our best. People are discouraged. I meet people every day whose economy is not recovering, Bob. They're not feeling this sense of recovery that people in Washington are boasting about. Their economy is not recovering. The folks out there working hard. And I believe that if we don't once again give people a sense of hope and optimism, first about their own economic situation, and then about the world that is on fire, it's going to be hard to get America back on track. And I believe most Americans, and the polls reflect this, believe that we are on the wrong track right now.
So again, Mike Huckabee sounds like he's running for president, and he's using this working class rhetoric to expand on his Christian credentials, I believe. And before I get to this other person who sounds very much like she's running for president on the Republican side, I want to show one clip from Republican Speaker of the House John Boehner talking about whether there's a split in the Republican Party and the problem he has getting together his majority in the House of Representatives, using a colorful metaphor that involves a wheelbarrow over in this clip.
Is this a sign that you will do business differently in the future on other big issues that are coming up on the debt ceiling and things like that with regard to your party? I mean, part of the issue is you've had to, as you've said many times, lead your sometimes raucous caucus, but are you able to buck
my
that
goal
now?
every day is to try to keep 218 frogs in a wheelbarrow long enough to get something passed. And I'm a conservative Republican. I'd rather work with my conservative allies. But I've always looked for ways to find bipartisan agreements that are in the best interest of the American people. And I'm going to continue to do that.
Let's talk about Israel.
So, yeah, frogs in a wheelbarrow. I guess that's better than the herding cats metaphor that I've heard so often about the Senate. So they're herding cats in the Senate, and they're trying to put 218 frogs in a wheelbarrow over in the House of Representatives, apparently. But before I leave the topic of the Republican Party and what's going on with the split and the fight for the nomination, I want to show a few quick clips from Fox News Sunday talking to another person who sounds very much like she's going to be running for the Republican nomination, or possibly for the vice presidential nomination, as Chris Wallace asks her while admitting that it's a sexist question. But that's the third clip. The first clip is where he points out that she is a woman, making her easy to be the one who stands out, which is important in the field, and then you'll hear her say that she is very likely to run over in this clip.
Crowded 2016 Republican field, the challenge now becomes finding a way to stand out. If she runs, former Hewlett-Packard chief Carly Fiorina would have no trouble doing that as the only woman in the GOP field. In recent weeks, she's also become a leading critic of Democratic frontrunner Hillary Clinton. Miss Fiorina, welcome back to Fox News Sunday.
It's great to be with you. Happy Palm Sunday.
Well, thank you. What are the chances that you're going to run for president?
Very high.
You're a former businesswoman. Give me a number.
Higher than 90%.
Really?
Yes, sir.
So what would prevent you? Why aren't you willing to announce right here today, I'm a candidate for president?
Well, because, we need, as other potential candidates are doing, we need to make sure we have the right team in place, that we have the right support, that we have the right financial resources lined up, just as all the other potential candidates are doing.
And when would you announce?
Probably late April, early May.
So yeah, over 90% chance she's going to announce at the end of April or beginning of May, and she has spent a lot of time attacking Hillary Clinton, the most likely Democratic nominee, and Chris Wallace asked her about that, played clips of her attacking Hillary Clinton, actually said it was good stuff, which seemed a little bit biased from a supposed straight news anchor on Fox News Sunday, but then he let her answer the question by attacking Hillary Clinton some more over, let me make sure I get the right one. Oh yeah, over in this clip.
You seem to take special delight in going after Hillary Clinton, and here is one of your greatest hits.
Unlike Mrs. Clinton, I know that flying is an activity, not an accomplishment. I have met Vladimir Putin, and I know that his ambition will not be deterred by a gimmicky red reset button. Mrs. Clinton, please name an accomplishment.
It's pretty good stuff. What is your basic case against Hillary Clinton?
Hillary Clinton lacks a track record of accomplishment. She is not candid, which suggests her character is flawed. And I think now in Emailgate, we not only have a situation where she's clearly not being candid. I mean, her saying that all of those emails she erased were just her and Bill chatting is a little bit like Richard Nixon saying that those erased moments on the tape were he and Pat talking. It's ridiculous. Of course there was more there than that. But I also think there's a competence issue now. Anyone in 2015 to say you can't have two email accounts on a single device obviously doesn't understand technology. When she talks about we had Secret Service agents guarding our server, for heaven's sakes, we're not concerned about the server being stolen. We're concerned about the server being hacked.
All right, well, let me.
So you can see her trying out her expertise at attacking Hillary Clinton as the most likely nominee of the Democratic Party. And what's interesting about that is the traditional role of the vice presidential candidate is to be the attack dog. And in a lot of ways, it's easier for a woman to attack a woman in a political sense, especially in Republican terms, where their voters are more older and more traditional and don't like men attacking women, even rhetorically, of course. They I don't know whether they support things like the Violence Against Women Act, but in terms of political rhetoric, they want people to be gentlemen and genteel in their public pronouncements. And Chris Wallace asked Carly Fiorina about that specifically, about whether she was running for vice president. And as he was asking it, he also accused himself of sexism, as you can see in this final clip from the interview with Carly Fiorina here.
Some people have suggested, and even as I ask it, I realize that it sounds sexist, that you're really running to be the running mate, that you would be the person to lead the attack against Hillary Clinton. It would be easier for you as a woman attacking another woman, and that you would, in a sense, neutralize the vulnerabilities the Republican Party has with women.
Well, I come from a world outside of politics where track record and accomplishments count. Words don't. If I run for president, it's because I can win the job, and it's because I can do the job.
Would you even consider being the running mate?
Well, when you start asking all the other candidates that question, then maybe we'll have that conversation.
Fair enough. Carly Fiorina, thank you for coming.
Okay, fair enough, but I don't know. You can let me know whether you think that was a sexist question from Chris Wallace. It was actually at least a more confrontational question than the other ones I showed. It wasn't a very confrontational interview. And that's the last clip I want to show on this topic of the Republican race for president 2016. I want to show one quick clip now on a possible candidate on the Democratic side who could challenge Hillary Clinton as the most likely nominee. This is Maryland Governor Martin O'Malley. He was over on This Week with George Stephanopoulos. And I don't know, I don't think he was that strong a candidate, or at least based on what he said in this interview, but he really impressed George Stephanopoulos as being about to run, as you can see in the beginning of that interview over here.
Joining us, Governor.
Thank you, George.
Two threshold questions for anyone even thinking of running for president. Why are you running? Why are you the best person for the job? What's your answer?
I believe that our country is at a defining moment in our history. The American dream has become something that is no longer true for the 80% of us who are working harder and not getting further ahead. And I have the experience through 15 years of public service as an executive in a big city and also as governor of a state of getting things done, bringing people together to accomplish difficult things in order to give our kids a better future and create a stronger economy.
Sounds like you've honed that down. But back in 2007, you were one of Hillary Clinton's earliest supporters. You were chair of her Maryland campaign. You called her the experienced leader America needs, and you added this. You said that no one is better equipped to repair America's alliances abroad and address the urgent needs of our communities at home. No one is better equipped. Is that still true today?
Well, I certainly believe that for those times that she would be the best choice for us as a country.
For those times?
For those times.
Not now?
I believe that there are new perspectives that are needed in order for us to solve the problems that we face as Americans and also the problems that we face as people on this planet. And I believe that new perspective and new leadership is needed. But more important than that, George, the two phrases I'm struck with all over the country are the phrases that people come up and say to me in every state, which is, we need people who know how to get things done, and we need new leadership.
What I'm struck by is it sounds
hearing.
like you just announced for president right here. You said that we need new perspectives, new leadership. You're ready to challenge her, aren't you?
Well, I think that our country always benefits from new leadership and new perspectives. I mean, let's be honest here. The presidency of the United States is not some crown to be passed between two families. It is an awesome and sacred trust that to be earned and exercised on behalf of the American people.
Those two families, Bush and Clinton?
Well, right now, George, you know,
oh, and I cut it off before I said any two families, but I guess it was kind of an attack on Hillary Clinton, but it didn't seem that strong a challenge to me, although like I said, George Stephanopoulos seemed pretty excited that he was about to announce, and I think it would be good if there were multiple candidates, and he's one, and I've showed a former senator and Navy man, Navy Secretary Jim Webb is another possibility, and Bernie Sanders, the socialist senator from Vermont, is another one. Elizabeth Warren has said multiple times she's not getting in, and I don't really expect that to change, assuming Hillary Clinton runs, but who knows about that? I don't know, but I wanted to address that, having spent all those other clips on what's going on the Republican side. I now want to move on to a really big topic in the news this last week, the Iran negotiations on a nuclear agreement with the United States and Europe and a couple other countries, and how that's supposed to happen. At least the general agreement is supposed to happen by the end of March, so that's in the next couple days, with the final agreement in June. And then there's also this ongoing conflict, regional conflict in Yemen and Syria and Iraq that has to do with Iran, and then some developments with Saudi Arabia and some of the Sunni forces. But first, on the nuclear deal, here's Andrea Mitchell on NBC's Meet the Press talking about some of the developments over here.
There certainly is. This has been 18 months of negotiating, only days to go, as you point out, and there are some stumbling blocks. The biggest sticking point, we are told, is that Iran is refusing to give up its research and development on nuclear equipment that can be used for peaceful purposes but could also be used to create nuclear weapons. The second sticking point, we're told, is the length of sanctions, when they would be phased out, how quickly they could be lifted. So those are complications. Now, both sides could be doing this for tactical reasons, the U.S. being very negative, Iran being very positive, to try to blame each other if this all falls apart. But for the first time, U.S. officials are talking pretty openly about what would happen if there is no deal.
And so I don't know if that means there's not going to be a deal, or if that's just some sort of negotiating position. You can let me know what you think down in the comment section. But now I'm going to show 3 quick clips of Republicans who are very skeptical about a possible deal and maybe don't want there to be a deal by the end of March. First one being Senator Richard Burris. This is appearing on CBS's Face the Nation, talking to Bob Schieffer, saying that maybe we should just step back and forget about a deal for a while because we can't trust those Iranians over here.
Senator, let me just start where the ambassador left off. He said everybody wants a deal, but what they want is a good deal. From what you're able to tell about these negotiations so far, is this a good deal that's shaping up?
Well, Bob, we've just got bits and pieces that have come from the administration or through other sources that are familiar with the negotiations. And it doesn't seem to be headed in the right direction. And clearly, with a deadline of Tuesday, I'm concerned with what we might give away. The Iranians don't seem to want to conclude this, but I think more importantly right now, when we see ISIL in 12 different countries around the world, we see Iran playing in about 9 countries financially or physically, I think now's the time to push back from the table and ask ourselves, is it really time to trust the people that we're negotiating with, the Iranians? I would encourage the administration, let's take more time. Let's not hasten to a deal, and I fear that Secretary Kerry believes that he's got to get a deal by Tuesday.
So that's one Republican trying to tell the Obama administration to hold off and step back and delay. And you'll hear sort of a similar set of arguments from the House side. This is the Republican chair of the House Foreign Relations Committee, Ed Royce, who's from California. And he says that there shouldn't be a deal unless Iran gives in on some, like, 3 really big things. One is that at the end of 10 years they shouldn't get a bomb, or at the end of 10 years their restrictions expire, supposedly in the current deal, and then extra military inspection of their military facilities, and then also, I think the third one had to do with sanctions. But anyway, I'll talk about it after you see that clip from Ed Royce on ABC's This Week with George Stephanopoulos this morning here.
Congressman Ed Royce, he joins us now from California. Congressman Royce, you heard Josh Earnest earlier in the show saying the president will only sign a deal that gives assurances that Iran cannot be a nuclear state. Do you believe the president can reach the kind of deal you can support?
Well, a lot is going to depend upon whether Iran backs down on a couple of points. One is they want this deal lifted after 10 years, the caps lifted after 10 years. The second point, they don't want inspections of some of their military facilities where they've done this research. And lastly, the IAEA, the international inspectors, have a list of 12 questions that they want Iran to answer on nuclear modeling, on explosive tests, 1,000 pages of documents about their program on a nuclear warhead. And so far, Iran has only agreed to answer half of the first question. So at this point, the French obviously are upset about this. Congress is a little upset about the direction Iran is pushing here. And lastly, the comments 4 days ago by the Ayatollah that he was chanting death to America as the crowd, were yelling death to America. This gives very real questions about why Iran won't come clean with this this evidence to the IAEA inspectors.
I'll count you in the skeptical camp. I wonder.
Yeah, he did sound pretty skeptical to me. I count him in the skeptical camp as well, just like George Stephanopoulos there. And another skeptic is John Boehner, the Speaker of the House, who was over on CNN's State of the Union with Dana Bash, and he was answering a question about whether Congress should have to approve any deal, and he basically said that we should wait, also similar to what you heard from Senator Richard Burr earlier, and similarly said that you can't trust those Iranians over in this clip.
You're going to be in Israel around the time of the deadline for the Iran negotiations. The president has made very clear that if there is a deal, he doesn't want or need Congress's approval. Are you going to make sure if there is a deal that is going to happen?
Well, let's wait and see if there's an agreement. I've got serious doubts. I had serious doubts over the last year whether there could be an agreement, and I still have serious doubts. We've got a regime that's never quite kept their word about anything. I just don't understand why we would sign an agreement with a group of people who, in my opinion, have no intention of keeping their word.
If there is no agreement, how quickly will you move to?
Oh, sorry, I should have ended that clip a little earlier. But that's another Republican saying that there shouldn't be a deal, you shouldn't trust the Iranians. And now I want to show a Democrat who's also a little skeptical, but a little more supportive of the Obama administration. This is Representative Adam Schiff over on CBS's Face the Nation, talking about the possibility of a deal with Iran over here.
On the House Intelligence Committee. You've just heard all the speakers who've come before you here. Congressman, what is your take on where we are right now?
We're in a very dangerous place, certainly in Yemen, and I think there is a real prospect of civil war here. It is probably unlikely that these airstrikes alone are going to be sufficient to repel the Houthis. The best hope is that it prompts them to go back to the negotiating table. But if the Houthis start launching Scud missiles into Saudi Arabia or incur across the border, then I think you are going to see a ground war, and there's no telling where that ends up.
Actually, that wasn't quite the clip I described. That was more about the Iranian regional conflict against the Sunni Arab states that's going on, especially in Yemen with the Houthis, and I'm going to get to that more in a minute. Although that was a little bit of a scary clip from Adam Schiff that belonged in this category that I think is only about one clip away. But here, let me show one additional clip about the possible deal. I think there are actually two more clips on a possible deal with Iran and the United States on Iran's nuclear program. This clip comes from the ambassador from Saudi Arabia. His name is Adel Al-Jaber, and he was over on a couple different programs. This is over on CBS's Face the Nation, talking to Bob Schieffer, and Bob Schieffer gets him to describe what kind of deal is in the Iran nuclear negotiation is okay with Saudi Arabia. And let's see, that is clip number 26. Over here.
All this playing out while the negotiations to try to curb Iran's nuclear program are underway. Does Saudi Arabia want a deal?
I believe everybody wants a deal, but everybody wants a good deal. We have been assured by the United States, by Secretary Kerry when he met with the foreign ministers of the GCC, that the deal that they intend to negotiate would prevent Iran from acquiring an atomic bomb. It would close all paths leading to an atomic bomb. It will limit substantially Iran's ability to do research and enrich, and it will impose intrusive and continuous inspections on Iran in the future. Now, we hope this will be the case, but we really will not know until we see the details, and I don't believe the details have been worked out yet. We expect that there will be a general framework agreement announced with the details to be negotiated over the next 2 or 3 months, and so the key will be what will be in those details.
So that is the ambassador from Saudi Arabia again saying that what is important about the nuclear deal with Iran is the details, which, that's not very informative, I guess. And then the last clip I want to show on this part of the issue of Iran before I get to the Yemen regional conflict that I kind of skipped ahead to with that Adam Schiff clip a minute ago. This is also the ambassador from Saudi Arabia answering a question. This time, this is his appearance over on NBC's Meet the Press, where he talked to Chuck Todd about whether Saudi Arabia would get a nuclear weapon if Iran did, and he didn't really answer the question, but it seemed kind of like a wink, wink. We kind of will, but it's really like subtext, reading between the lines or whatever. So you can watch the clip and let me know, do you think he said that Saudi Arabia would get a nuclear weapon if Iran did? I think he kind of did, but certainly not in a clear way over here.
You declined to rule out the idea in an interview earlier this week that Saudi Arabia would pursue its own nuclear program if you felt as if Iran wasn't going to be stopped from eventually getting a nuclear weapon. Is that a fair assessment?
I basically said that we will not discuss these issues in public.
Well, if you were going to say no, you'd say no.
Options. Well, every country has to look out for its own interest, and we have to protect our people and do whatever it takes to do so. And we have to assess the threat and make a decision on how we're going to deal with it.
So protect our people, assess the threat, and make a decision. That sounds kind of like the reports I've heard that Saudi Arabia could very quickly get a nuclear weapon if they wanted to. But I want to move on to a related Iran topic, the conflict in Yemen and the greater conflict in the Middle East that has resulted in Saudi Arabia heading up this Sunni Arab force that's fighting Iranian influence in Yemen. And I'm going to show several clips about that, starting with a report from NBC's Richard Engel, also on Meet the Press this morning over here.
That the country's president fled to earlier this week. And as our chief foreign correspondent Richard Engel explains, the U.S. is now stuck on both sides of what appears to be a proxy war that could consume the region.
Saudi jets took off for bombing runs in Yemen 100 hours after American advisors were forced to evacuate under the cover of night. Here, Iranian-backed rebels, Shiite Muslims, have the pro-U.S. government on the run. At the same time that the U.S. finds itself fighting Iran on the one hand, it's working with Iran on the other. In Iraq, the U.S. is giving Iranian-backed militias air support. In Switzerland, it's negotiating with Iran. In Yemen, the U.S. left the fight against the Iranian-backed rebels. And in Syria, the U.S. is supporting both the fight against Iran and its ally, President Assad, and with Iran against ISIS.
The end result is we do not seem to be, to the people in the region and to the American people, pursuing and presenting an overall strategy that will defeat the really bad forces in that region.
The former U.S. ambassador and several analysts say the Sunni states led by Saudi Arabia are going their own way because they believe this administration can't be relied on in its policy with what they see as their real enemy, Shiite Iran. Leaders at an Arab summit in Egypt today even called for the creation of a united standing Arab army. It would be an alternative to dependence on the U.S. and stand against Iran. There's a proxy war underway that's big and expanding between Saudi Arabia and now other Sunni nations against Iran. And critics say the administration is trying and failing to play both sides of it, confusing its friends and emboldening its enemies. Richard Engel, NBC News, Istanbul.
Now, I thought that was a fairly good report from Richard Engel, reporting from Istanbul. He did have some critical comments about the Obama administration, whether they're playing both sides, and I have several clips on the both sides theme, but I didn't think it was overly biased like this next clip from Fox News Sunday. Chris Wallace, I think, gives it to their reporter, Jennifer Griffin, is actually the one who gives this report, and they really emphasize this supporting both sides theme. And you'll also hear Jennifer Griffin here show this clip of Senator John McCain questioning a general in the Senate about whether the United States only had 1 hour notice before Saudi Arabia started bombing the Houthis in Yemen. And after I show that clip, I'll show a response from the Saudi ambassador about that. But here's the Fox News Sunday coverage of pretty much the same facts with definitely a different spin than you saw from NBC's Meet the Press in the last clip. Here's Jennifer Griffin this morning.
Now, let's turn to the Middle East, which is spiraling into a regional conflict where the U.S. finds itself on both sides of the divide. And the growing chaos raises questions about President Obama's strategy and nuclear talks with Iran. Fox News national security correspondent Jennifer Griffin explains where things stand now.
Chris, the growing concern at the Pentagon is that while the U.S. military is fighting ISIS on behalf of Iraq, Iran's influence is spreading, forming, in essence, a Shia crescent across the Middle East. Iran's influence in neighboring Iraq has grown since U.S. forces pulled out at the end of 2011. 3 weeks ago, Iraq and Iran launched an operation to retake Saddam Hussein's hometown Tikrit from ISIS. The move surprised U.S. commanders. This week, after the Iranian-led operation stalled, U.S. warplanes launched airstrikes over Tikrit at the request of the Iraq government. Before doing so, the Pentagon demanded the Iranian-backed forces, led by General Qasem Soleimani, pull back. Some accuse the U.S. of serving as Iran's air force. Meanwhile, in Yemen, another Iranian-backed Shia proxy overthrew the government this week. The Sunni government of Saudi Arabia began airstrikes. Egyptian warships are steaming toward Yemen. The Pentagon was again caught off guard.
General Austin, when were you told by the Saudis that they were going to take military action in Yemen?
Sir, I had a conversation with the Chad right before they took action, so it was shortly before.
Meanwhile, Secretary of State John Kerry, facing a deadline Tuesday, is trying to hammer out the details of a framework agreement to curtail Iran's nuclear program, negotiations that Sunni governments oppose. Chris?
Jennifer Griffin reporting for the...
So you saw in that report from Jennifer Griffin that she showed Senator John McCain talking to that, I think, was it General Lloyd Austin, about the amount of warning the United States had before Saudi Arabia attacked these Houthi forces in Yemen. And over on NBC's Meet the Press, Chuck Todd actually asked the Saudi ambassador about that. And he said that the United States has been talking about this with Saudi Arabia for months, and it was only this necessary immediate response to a crisis that had a short amount of notice. Over in this clip.
Let's bring to us.
Before you started the airstrikes, our commander at CENTCOM, General Austin, said he was only told about the attacks 1 hour before they began. And he did this at a hearing, and John McCain said that that was quite a commentary, and he thought that that said more about the relationship right now between Saudi Arabia and the United States, that really it is deteriorating. Is he right?
I don't believe the relationship is deteriorating. In fact, it's very, very strong. We have talked about the possible options of using force with the United States for many months. This option became much more serious in the last few weeks. And in the run-up to making the decision and putting together the coalition, we were in constant touch with the White House and other U.S. government agencies about this. The decision to use military force was made at the last moment because of the developments that were happening with regards to the Houthis' potential occupation of Aden. And so I can see how somebody would say we knew about the decision was made at the last minute, but the thinking and the planning...
and you were sharing this with the United States? And the United States is fully on board?
Absolutely. The U.S. wouldn't be working with us if it wasn't on board.
What is the...
So I guess that's also spin, but you can tell me which one you think is more believable. The Saudi ambassador saying that he'd been talking to the Americans for months about this possible airstrike, that only the necessary immediate response to a crisis had a short amount of warning. Or you can side with the Fox News spin about it being a symptom of a deteriorating relationship between the United States and Saudi Arabia. You saw the clips for yourself. You can let me know. But I also want to show another clip from the Saudi ambassador. This is back on CBS's Face the Nation with Bob Schieffer, where he talked about whether this is a proxy war between Saudi Arabia and Iran, and instead he said it was a necessary war because they had to respond to what the Houthis did in Yemen, but then he also admitted that Iran is behind what the Houthis did in Yemen, so that's kind of a no but yes answer, I guess, over in this clip.
This really is, Mr. Ambassador, is a proxy war. Saudi Arabia on one side and the Iranians on the other, because they are backing these rebel groups in Yemen right now.
That's correct, but I wouldn't describe it as a proxy war. I would describe it as a war of necessity. We had no choice. We tried every possible way to avoid it. The Yemenis tried every possible way to avoid it. Agreements were made, and every single agreement that was made with the Houthis, 67 of them to be precise, the Houthis reneged on. And so they continued to take over the country. And when they were virtually about to take over the city of Aden with its president, we had to step in order to, in response to the request by the legitimate government to do so under Article 51 of the UN.
How much did Iran have to do with the Houthis?
A lot. The Houthis are ideologically affiliated with Iran. The Iranians have provided them with weapons, the Iranians have provided them with advisors, and the Iranians have provided them with money.
So that is definitely true, at least the last part there. And the next clip I want to show on this issue of Saudi Arabia's building up of this Arab army, or Sunni Arab army, to fight Iranian influences, from HBO's Real Time with Bill Maher, where Bill Maher talks about how this was his idea all along, and then he also goes into this whole issue of how the United States is on both sides here, which is really complicated, and a couple of his guests chime in over in this clip.
Yes, there's a new one in the Middle East, Yemen. There's a war in Yemen now, the Saudi Arabians and a big coalition, like all the Gulf states are doing it. Pakistan is sending the Navy. Egypt is getting involved. Turkey say, you know, I said on the show a few weeks ago, I said, where are the Arab nations fighting their own battles? They heard me. They watched. And they went to war against the Houthis, who I'd never heard of. These are not the Tutsis, these are the Houthis. And the Houthis must be like, what the fuck did we do to get the world against us? Because nobody ever did this before. But the Houthis are backed by Iran. They took over the government in Yemen, and now everybody's attacking them. And it's interesting, the LA Times headline today was, U.S. finds itself on both sides at once in the Middle East, because with the ISIS people, we're with the Iranians. We're helping the Iranians fight the ISIS people. But in Yemen, we're helping the Saudi Arabians.
But it's complicated because the Houthis are also against Al-Qaeda. So that was a complication, and the answer ought to be for us.
But this is a Sunni Shiite throwdown. Isn't this our cue to leave?
Yes.
It's like when you're out with another, you know, You ever been out with another couple at dinner and they have a big fight and you're like, okay, we'll see you on Monday.
But when you've been friends with that couple, though, when you've been in the middle of that fight for so long, it becomes harder to extricate yourself, and also to the point where there's an entire generation of people who have been bred to hate us for being involved in the first place, who are now interested in just exacting the revenge of our involvement. So it's so convoluted that this latest flare-up seems to be just another layer of complication about how do we get out now?
So, yeah, I thought a lot of that was amusing. And this issue of the United States being on both sides because it's helping Iran in their fight against the ISIS and Tikrit, and then it's helping Saudi Arabia in the fight against the Iranian-backed Houthis in Yemen. It reminded me of this Woody Allen movie, Bananas, from the 1970s, and I actually pulled up a quick clip from that about how the CIA was involved in this Central American country that was the setting for a lot of the movie Bananas, the Banana Republic, and you can see the troops being sent in by the CIA in this quick clip.
Any word of what we're heading for?
I hear it's San Marcos.
We fighting for or against the government?
CIA's not taking any chances this time. Some of us are for, and some of us are going to be against them.
Oh.
Yeah, the CIA is not taking any chances, and I guess the United States isn't taking any chances with the whole Iran conflict in the Middle East. Some of our forces are on the pro-Iranian side, some of our forces are on the anti-Iranian side. But I want to show a couple more quick clips from the Saudi ambassador talking to Chuck Todd on NBC's Meet the Press about the Yemen situation before I move on to the next topic. First, here he is saying something that I also kind of remember from the Cold War times that Bananas was representing, talking about how Saudi Arabia was invited in, but of course it's kind of true based on the Houthis overthrowing the government that was friendly to Saudi Arabia, and you can see that over here.
Meet the Press.
Thank you. Great to be here.
All right, let me start with a basic question. What is Saudi Arabia's objective in getting involved militarily in Yemen?
Very simple. We came at the invitation of the legitimate Yemeni government. We're there to protect the people of Yemen from an occupation by a radical group that is bent on turning Yemen towards more radicalism. We came to protect the legitimate government of Yemen, and we want to restore peace and stability in a country that's neighboring to us.
No, that sounds like everyone defending every invasion I've ever heard of on the news for like my whole life. But you can let me know what you think. And like I said, there is truth to it because Saudi Arabia is defending the government of Yemen from these Houthi rebels that are backed by Iran. But I also thought it was interesting that the Saudi ambassador wouldn't say that there would be ground troops involved, but also wouldn't rule it out because so far it's only these airstrikes, and you can see that this is the last clip on the Yemen issue and the Iran-Yemen issue over here.
What is the, why would you send ground troops in if you guys decided to do that?
We haven't made the decision to send ground troops in so far. So far it's been an air campaign, and we have a plan in motion, and we're executing this plan.
Okay, but what would be the reason that you would send ground troops in if Aden falls to the Houthis?
We have to see. We are not contemplating this issue. We're determined to degrade and destroy the Houthi capabilities. We're determined to protect and preserve the legitimate government of Yemen, and we're determined to protect the people of Yemen. And so we will continue this campaign until those objectives are achieved.
Should we?
So, I don't know, ground troops from Saudi Arabia, and it sounds like they're getting troops from Egypt, which has a much larger Sunni Arab army. That could be like a regional conflict, and that could be a really big deal, but it doesn't sound like Saudi Arabia is committed to ground troops. No one ever seems committed to ground troops until they actually use them, but that is a topic and an issue that seems like it's going to be on my show for weeks, months, maybe even years to come. I want to move on to another issue that seems to come on to my show all the time, this issue of Islam and whether Muslim extremism is the fault of Islam or the fault of extremism. I'm not going to go too deeply into it, but I have a couple quick clips on that issue The first one is also from the Saudi Arabian ambassador, where Chuck Todd calls him on Saudi support for Islamic extremism, in this case Sunni Wahhabism, but the Saudi ambassador denies the whole thing, as you can see over here.
Saudi Arabia owns any of the problems of Sunni extremism that's been exported out of Saudi Arabia? Accept responsibility for that? For the growth of ISIS? Would this happen with Sunni extremism without, individuals in Saudi Arabia quietly helping these folks out?
I don't know that this would be a fair point to make. I think the Kingdom of Saudi, and I know that the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia is a target of ISIS. We have captured many members of ISIS in the kingdom who tried to kill our people. We're fighting them as we speak in Syria. So if there are individuals in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia who are providing funding to ISIS, we will punish them. In fact, we've arrested a number of them and they're sitting in our jails.
All right.
Now, based on the facts that I know, that seems pretty disingenuous. I think there's a lot of support for Islamic extremism that comes from rich people in Saudi Arabia and this extreme Wahhabist. You saw the clip last week from Ayaan Hirsi Ali talking about the Medina Muslims, and that's the Sunni Wahhabists who, I guess Mecca and Medina are both in Saudi Arabia, but anyway, the one other quick clip I want to play on this whole Islam issue isn't even really about Islam. It's about Zachary Quinto's upcoming role in a movie about Edward Snowden, apparently, directed by Oliver Stone, that I hadn't heard about until I saw it discussed on the Overtime segment of HBO's Real Time, and you can see that entire 14.5-minute segment in a link down in the video description. And at the very end, Bill Maher makes a kind of vague, tangential reference to the Islam issue, especially regarding Glenn Greenwald, as I'll discuss after you see that here.
Zachary Quinto, what can you tell us about your role in the movie about Edward Snowden?
Oh yeah. Well, I'm playing Glenn Greenwald, who has been a frequent contributor here and many other places. I'm really looking forward to it, getting ready to go to Hong Kong. And
I'm not knowing anything about this movie. This is...
Oliver Stone's directing it. He's written it. Yeah.
Oliver Stone. I love Oliver Stone.
I know, me too. I'm really excited about it. And to play Glenn, who's so prolific and has such a really articulate and fixed point of view on everything that he's done with Snowden and around exposing the NSA's overreaching is interesting for me.
Yeah.
Looking forward to it.
He has some really stupid point of views too.
Yeah.
But
we're not focusing on those ones.
Yeah, I like Glenn, but
no,
there's some...
Totally.
So I guess Bill Maher couldn't resist taking a little shot at Glenn Greenwald, and I think that's about the issue of Islam, even though he didn't really say what it was about. But I just wanted to include that clip in that topic. And now we're going to show a couple other clips from HBO's Real Time with Bill Maher on the issue of free speech, which is an issue near and dear to my heart as a longtime member of the ACLU and a volunteer activist with the ACLU. And a long time ago, I used to be a cooperating attorney with the ACLU, but now I do non-lawyer volunteer activist stuff. Anyway, first, I was surprised to see that I agreed with a lot of what Mike Huckabee said about free speech, and Bill Maher also agreed with him, which I'll talk about after you see that clip from last Friday over here.
Here's what I feel like. When we become coarse, the coarseness of our language ends up becoming the attitude we have toward other people.
I agree.
And
especially
then people
in social
become
media.
brutal. They become very just mean and angry.
Are you on Twitter?
I am.
It's
yeah.
nasty.
It is very
You
nasty.
read your feed, they must say terrible things.
They say awful things.
They say awful things about everybody.
But free speech is a great thing, but responsible speech is a part of the balance of that. And I never want the government, I wouldn't even want anyone else shutting me down or shutting you down or anyone else. But I'd like for people to self-police and to say, I can say anything I want, but I'm going to say the things that are more wholesome, that are more edifying to the overall culture and society, that make us a more civil country rather than a less civil country.
Okay.
Now, I actually agree that you should have a right to say whatever you want, but then once you have that right, that everyone should take responsibility and not say things that are insulting and vulgar. And I mean, you have the right to say that, but when you're in the company of people who you want to respect you should say things that are respectable. And I don't think that is any problem with free speech. Although Bill Maher also brought up the topic of free speech and liberals kind of attacking liberals in a way that I thought was a little bit unfair, but he brought up this Dolce Gabbana controversy with Elton John about some like anti-gay comments that these gay guys made that you can see Bill Maher discuss or explain over in his new rule. In fact, you can see the entire thing at a link down in the video description. This is a little excerpt from it here.
Yes, we joke about everybody here, and that's something a lot of liberals have forgotten how to do. For folks who take such pride in their love of diversity, liberals increasingly seem to tolerate none in their own ranks. I don't necessarily agree with Dolce & Gabbana, but what is the point of attacking people who are 95% on your side? Give them a break. They're from Sicily, the same place Justice Scalia comes from. And if you want to protest someone who doesn't support gays, start with him. But no, it's easier to get all fake outraged over the hateful anti-gay speech of two men who bedazzle codpieces for a living. Ellen, Martina, they were all furious. Courtney Love said she planned to burn her Dolce & Gabbana and then breathe in the melting polyester, because, hey, you never know what might get you high. But Dame Elton John was the angriest of all, tweeting, "How dare you refer to my children as synthetic? My hair, yes, but not my children." He recorded a protest song called "I Won't Let My Son Go Down on You." And called for a boycott. Really? You can't sell handbags now if you only agree with Elton John almost all the time. In Syria, ISIS is throwing gay people off buildings. Maybe there are bigger battles to fight.
I'm not exactly sure where I come down on that particular topic about the free speech, though I am against secondary boycotts, although that seems more like a primary boycott where you're boycotting products made by someone whose opinions you disagree with, not because they are associated with something else. But I don't know. You can let me know what you think about all that. I did see Bill Maher actually attacking liberal. I don't know why he spent so many times attacking liberals, but I saw him actually extend that. You know, on Saturday night, I went to the Bay Area and saw Bill Maher do a stand-up routine in Oakland. You can see here, here's the marquee from the Fox Theater in Oakland, and I was actually, you can see me here sitting over in the second row. I had good second row seats because I was celebrating a birthday this week, and I didn't take any pictures during the performance because they said something really stern about not taking pictures. They'd like confiscate any discs or recording devices. But after he was done, during the ovation, I took one quick little, you can see here's a picture of him, like before he walked off stage. He took this little purple booklet. He had a lot of notes, so that was a little bit heartening that Bill Maher has to use notes. But I wanted to show you a few quick clip still photos I took from getting to see Bill Maher live, and he also spent a lot of time taking on liberals because he was in Oakland right near Berkeley. And now I have a couple quick other clips from Bill Maher I want to show before I finish the show on climate change, or once from Bill Maher and then once from CNN State of the Union talking to Speaker of the House John Boehner, Dana Bash. First, over on HBO's Real Time with Bill Maher, he showed a satellite photo that shows how the groundwater is. This is groundwater from 2002 to 2014. The redder it gets, first we're like using up. We don't have any precipitation. That's our income. Then our checking account. Well, I'll show a clip from this climate. Climate expert who Bill Maher talked about how since 90% of California's water goes to agriculture, how we should just stop growing certain things. And I think Bill Maher kind of had a point on that over in this clip.
isn't the answer we just have to not grow so much? Because most of the water gets taken by agriculture.
We gotta eat, man. You had
but we don't have to
eat food in your.
Yeah, but we don't have to eat almonds.
No, right.
You know,
and
almonds,
so
I hear, take 10% of the water.
You're right, right.
Like it takes 1
problem.
gallon of water to grow a single almond.
Right.
I mean, I like almonds, but, you know, sometimes you got to take one for the team.
Right,
almonds.
right.
I mean, what's...
No, right.
What can you not live without? Water or almonds? I can live without almonds.
I hear you, but you know, almond milk is cool. No, so we grow. There's a big shift in the Central Valley, and this is a problem. And the shift is from the annual crops to the perennial crops, to the orchard crops, the nut trees and the vineyards, and they're really sucking the
and
the valley
grass.
dry.
People,
grass
you know,
crazy. So grass is like the biggest crop in the country.
I put in fake grass.
Good for you.
It's fine.
But you know, there are homeowners.
There's nothing wrong with fake grass.
There are homeowners associations that won't let you do that, and that's crazy.
What?
It's true.
They won't let you.
They will not let you.
Huh. And that is crazy. I actually have fake grass. I think it's a good thing, but if you want to know why it is that there are some people who won't let you have fake grass, I want to show one final clip. This is from CNN State of the Union, Dana Bash talking to Speaker of the House John Boehner, and he also says something really weird at the beginning, that he's anal about his grass, and then he shows himself with his gas-powered lawnmower, which also has a greenhouse gas problem, and talks about his pride with his lawns, which is the real problem. For the final clip of the night, which CNN State of the Union host Dana Bash doesn't call him on at all, actually says amen to over here.
I'm pretty anal about my grass, and so what I love about the spring is when I watch the grass down the mall begin to green up.
It's getting there.
I get pretty excited about it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because we know you like to cut your grass.
I do. Matter of fact, I had a lawnmower running last weekend.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, I made sure the oil was changed and sharpened the blade and put some new gas in there and got it started. Grass isn't quite ready to be cut
not
yet, but the mower is ready.
Amen.
Amen.
So the Speaker of the House did not seem very concerned about climate change in that clip, and neither did CNN State of the Union host Dana Bash, which is a little disturbing. But I'm running really late here, and I have to finish up the show and get to a very late dinner. Thanks for all of you who joined me live. I think you peaked at around 145. Over 130 of you still here, so thanks for that. If you're watching this as a recorded show, let me know what you think. For all of you, you can support my videos by the link down in the video description, or possibly up in one of these corners there's a little eye that you can click on to give me a direct donation, or to become one of my patrons on Patreon, which makes it a lot easier for me to continue making these videos through 2016. Otherwise, I'll be seeing you this Wednesday for LiberalViewer First Wednesday Live to take your questions. Whatever you want to ask me, then I'll do a quick show on Wednesday afternoon to answer those, and then next Sunday see you hopefully on time, not delayed, because this has been such a long weekend. Sorry about that, but 6:30 p.m. Pacific next weekend, Sunday, for LiberalViewer Sunday Live Clip Roundup. Until then, I guess I'll be seeing you all around the internet.